Part of the problem is we're all going to find out after the next crash. And that's something we should all think hard about when we're talking about the trees or the forest. Because, look, there are a few industries that need more innovation and competition than the financial industry. I mean, I don't think that's disputable. If you look at the concentration and the poor incentives, the barriers to entry in the financial industry, it's hard to compete with them. But there's nothing worse for innovation than a crash, a crisis, or a scandal. And Shamir's comment about getting a bank charter in 2009, and why was that? Well, 2008 was the worst financial crash since 1929. It caused the worst economy since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Everything pulls back at that point, right? For good reasons, and maybe for some bad reasons, but mostly for good reasons. And so what we have to do when we're making policy or rules, and whether we're looking at the tree or the forest, is figure out how we really strike a balance in a way that achieves the statutory objectives which the chair and the FDIC has to do, irrespective of their personal views, and how that works in the overall architecture. But for me, when I think about this, the worst thing to do is to start calling, everything sticky money when the label doesn't change the fact that it's hot money. And 3, 4, 5 years down, and I'm not saying anybody's suggesting that. I'm not in any way. I think people have good faith arguments for what they want to do. But I think, the problem is that they're associated with profit maximization, which is perfectly legal, and we want that to happen because good things come from it. But bad things come from it when profit maximization drives policy and rules. And what you need is the balance, because in 5 or 6 years, when something blows up, then you're going to end up with an overreaction, and you're going to set back innovation even more. And we're going to be constantly in this cycle where we seem to be in too often, and you and I unfortunately have been around long enough, and not you obviously, but your father, that we see these cycles of where you kind of have open regulation, something happens, boom, it gets closed back down, and then it's got to come back, and then boom. And what we need, and that's why I say we need this balanced regulation where you're, particularly when you get anywhere near OPM, other people's money. When you get near other people's money and those people are taxpayers, then the sensitivity to that should be higher. If you're in the non-insured depository arena, then the concerns can be low. If you want to lose your venture capitalist people money, I mean you want to. If that happens, I feel bad for those people, but they've got a portfolio and they're going to be fine. When those risks and those costs are shifted to the taxpayers in Main Street, then the consideration for them ought to be commensurately higher. And so when you're looking for the balance on the spectrum, the analysis isn't always the same. Sometimes if you're out of the banking system, higher tolerance for risk, higher tolerance for loss, because you and your funders are going to bear the loss. When you're over here in the insured depository and with taxpayers are going to bear it, then higher goes the consideration for them. And then somewhere along that spectrum, you end up with a balance. And that's what we should look for. And right now, the balance is out of whack in the overall regulatory architecture. It's all going towards industry asks, industry gets. And we're all going to pay the price for that, no matter what your views are. I mean, if you believe, we all believe in innovation. We all believe in progress. And if we want to have that materialize, then we need a set of rules that are going to work over time. I just don't think it's either or. I think it's both. I think you can have innovation and you can protect the deposit insurance fund and taxpayers. And I think the constant characterization of one or the other is just a false choice. And I think it's difficult and it's messy and it's complex, but you can have both, and we should have both, and we should expect both. And that's ultimately where we need to get.